Multiple threats in the tropics from the main development region to the Caribbean to right off the southeast coastline as early as this weekend. All the details in today's video. Happy Tuesday, folks. Hopefully we're having a wonderful day out there. It is October 7th. Tracking the tropics for you, as well as kind of a hybrid system here, almost a nor'easter-like system that could be right off the Carolina coastline this weekend. In fact, it's looking like a high likelihood now. The question is, what are the impacts going to be? But also, like I mentioned, watching the Caribbean for potential development. We've got what I'm going to go ahead and call Tropical Storm Jerry now has already formed in the main development region. Just waiting for the National Hurricane Center to give it that name themselves, but you'll see why I'm calling it that here in a second. So a lot going on here for the end of the first week of October here. We had the full moon last night. The weather also giving the full moon vibes as it is very active out there. So we'll be breaking all of it down for you in today's video. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Gerald. I'm a meteorologist at WCCB Charlotte. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for the latest notifications so you're up to date here with all the latest model data, my breakdown and analysis of that data and how that could impact your forecast. And let me know where you're watching from down in the comments. I had one more thing as well here. We're actually getting pretty darn close to 50,000 subscribers, which sounds crazy to even say out loud. So again, if you haven't already subscribed, please help us out. Just hit the button. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. And all it does is help both of us. So it's a mutually beneficial thing to do. All right, well, let's dive right on into the data here. And you can see looping next to me is the latest run of our American model straight from this morning. And you can see that we've got multiple areas of low pressure showing up out there. We've got one in the main development region. We've got one that shows up right off the southeast coastline, and then some sort of disturbed weather down into the Caribbean that I think we need to keep a very close eye on as well, which not a lot of people are talking about right now, but I'll talk about it because, again, I think it could be a problem, and I'll show you why, obviously. I never tell you something without backing it up, so that's one thing about the channel here. Now, if we just look at all of this on satellite imagery right now, you know, a lot of these areas are showing up quite well. This is what I'm calling Tropical Storm Jerry down to the south. I mean, this is a very well-defined wave, and honestly, I think it's a tropical storm. Now, I imagine the NHC will probably designate it by this afternoon, so I'll save everyone the trouble. I'm just going to call it Tropical Storm Jerry. They might call it Tropical Depression first, but either way, just looking at that, I think it's going to have no problem getting to that next level. Other than that, we've got this stalled out frontal boundary over the Atlantic from South Florida through the Bahamas. That's going to be important for our southeast system that gets going here by the weekend. So remember that is there. That'll come up later in the video as well. And then well out here on the left-hand side of your screen towards the Yucatan, yeah, what in the world's that? Well, that's an area that the National Hurricane Center is also watching for potential development and also looking quite healthy. So we got a lot of things going on out there and a lot to absolutely talk about here in today's video. I'll quickly show you the water vapor loop as well and give you an update on what that looks like. And yeah, Jerry running into some drier air, but that hasn't stopped him so far. So I think that'll probably unlikely be a detriment to getting, again, that tropical cyclone status today. We've got plenty of moisture here into the central parts of the Atlantic where Jerry will end up eventually and likely strengthen. And then, yeah, a ton of moisture out into the Central America region. That could be problematic. Again, I know I keep saying it, but we'll talk about it here a little bit later on in the video. I don't think I'll show you is the outlook from the National Hurricane Center. Here's the Jerry outlook at 90% chance of getting that name today. Excuse me, sorry there. So again, like I said, I'm just going to call it Jerry. And then, yeah, only a little yellow 10% for that area over the Yucatan. Really, the problem with this one is it's just about to hit the Yucatan and then not going to have a lot of room in the Bay of Campeche to really develop into something all that big. So we'll keep an eye on it, but luckily, I think the Yucatan going to help us out. All right, let's start with Jerry, though. Let's go over the environmental conditions it's in right now and how that could fuel this thing over the coming days and then track where it's headed. I apologize for the flashing screen. I'll stop it here in 1 second. It's just the data is missing some gaps in between, but look at this, and then let me ask you this. Does it look like a tropical storm? Does it smell like a tropical storm? Is it giving tropical storm? If your answer is yes to all three of those, like I think, then yeah, guess what? This is probably Tropical Storm Jerry. So we'll go ahead and turn the animation off so we can all see and not get blinded here. I mean, just such a well-defined looking wave this morning. Really took off into the overnight as some of our model guidance suggested, and as I told you I thought would happen. Figured this one would get a pretty early start on things that already looked pretty good yesterday. Is there anything to slow it down, though? Well, yeah, there's some dry air nearby, but the worst of the dry air is behind it already. You can see out there to the north and east of where the system is, a little bit in front of it. But like I said, I don't really think enough to end things. Another thing that is really helping the storm out is it's working right into a pocket of very favorable shear. Remember, the storm working this direction. Let me draw that in a pink color so maybe it shows up better. Working right into these green colors, these favorable areas of wind shear. If that wasn't enough to convince you that this one's going to do okay, you look at the sea surface temperatures out here. Yeah, pretty darn warm. We're talking about 29 to 30 degrees Celsius. Plenty warm enough to support a tropical system. And if you look at the ocean heat content, not off the charts, but it's only going to get better from here for the storm. So this is one we need to watch pretty carefully, folks. I'm not necessarily thinking it'll undergo rapid intensification. However, I could see a world that it does. I mean, there's a lot of things here indicating that this one's going to do okay. If we look at our scatterometer and see if we've got anything, don't have anything there. We didn't have any microwave imagery data yet. We'll just look at our satellite and winds, and yeah, all the data here indicating that this one is spinning, especially in the upper levels. Maybe a little bit of work to do in the lower levels to get there. But again, like I said, folks, I'm calling this one Jerry, if you ask me. We've got upper level divergence, right stacked on lower level convergence. Remember, that means we've got wind coming together at the surface and wind spreading apart above. That's a healthy thing for a tropical system to be able to have. If you look at the vorticity, yeah, again, welcome to Jerry. Jerry, welcome to planet Earth. Hopefully you enjoy your stay. So that's what the storm looks like right now. And I'll zoom out one more time and show you the sea surface temperatures one more time and the ocean heat content. Remember, the track of this thing, as we've been talking about, the mean wind flow is kind of like this. The question becomes, does it hit the islands? We'll be answering that here next up, or at least trying to. But we've got a lot of warm water ahead, folks. And as I mentioned, that warm water only going to get deeper. I think especially this one's going to have a chance to really run with the horses here, run with the wind, whatever you want to say, once it gets towards the islands. Very favorable ocean heat content. And again, at least right now, if we take a look at the wind shear data out there, favorable enough. Now, some stronger winds to the north, but if it can avoid that, this one's got a pretty high ceiling to work with. All right, that's Jerry right now. Let's look at some model data regarding the storm, kind of time out where it's going and how strong it could get with these environmental conditions. All right, let's start with some model data. Here's the GFS. What is it showing? Well, GFS actually doing pretty good on getting this one developed quickly. A lot of the other models didn't have that. The GFS did, and it looks like it's going to be right. So over the next couple of days, GFS strengthens this obviously into a tropical storm, and by Thursday and borderlining Friday here, gets it down near hurricane status just to the north of the islands. We're going to have to hope that this is the case. Again, here's the storm. They're circled in pink. Right here is Puerto Rico, and then the Barbados and all the other Antilles Islands here, excuse me. So just to the north of the islands here on the GFS model run, and then eventually after that gets even stronger, gets down towards major hurricane status and curves north and misses everybody, including Bermuda, from there. So let's hope that's the case. Let's hope this is a pretty good miss from the islands. If you look at the European model, struggling on forming the storm, so maybe we'll actually go with the GFS for once. But even then, track-wise, keeps it north of the islands here, and wouldn't be much of a problem. Again, could bring some gusty winds and rain. Don't get me wrong, but this would not be a direct impact, at least with that model guidance. That's not the only model guidance, so I do want to show you some ensemble data here and give you an idea of kind of some of the potential changes here. Now, this is the European ensembles, and here's the problem. The storm getting a little bit stronger, I'd say, in the near term than some of the models are showing, and the stronger members, generally speaking, are getting closer to the islands. Well, why is that, Gerald? It's the steering currents. Now, when the storms are weak, the low-level winds kind of steer it more. When they get stronger, more the mid and upper-level winds can kind of steer these systems. So the stronger ones are feeling a bit of a different steering pattern, which are bringing it kind of closer to the island. So that's something to watch. This is not a guaranteed miss right now, but it's promising that most of the guidance keeps it away from a direct impact of the islands. Obviously, you're going to want to stay tuned to the forecast, though, because this one can change. The GFS, even closer here, and GFS has been handling this a little bit better. So I think at the very least, this is going to be a close pass. Excuse me. It's been a long night, by the way, a long night of studying last night. So if I'm sounding a little weird today, lack of sleep, but that's okay, right? Yeah, so you get the idea, though, here. Pretty close on a lot of the members. You also have the beta effect, which oftentimes moves these things a little bit further westbound than the models say they will go. So Need to watch Jerry closely. Could still directly impact the islands, and if it does, that likely means it's a pretty strong hurricane. And we've gotten pretty lucky in the Antilles and Barbados and the British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and places like that this hurricane season thus far. We want to keep it that way, but we need to very closely watch Jerry because we could see even major hurricane impacts here. Timing would be about 3 days from now. And today's Tuesday, this will be Wednesday, this will be Thursday into Friday. So I think by tomorrow we'll have a much better idea, but very closely watch the trends on this one. It could go in a direction we don't want to see pretty quickly. All right, that's Jerry. Let's move on to the Caribbean now and talk about what I think could be brewing there by the middle of the month. Then we'll break down this East Coast storm potential to round out the video. All right, let me immediately start with this. I mean, the waters out here near Cuba, the Yucatan, and near Central America are just off the charts here. I mean, this is bathtub water, folks. We're talking about near 90-degree Fahrenheit sea surface temperatures right into this region I'm watching. So that's reason number one I'm watching. All right. Not only that, though, another reason I'm watching is not only is this very warm water, it's very warm and deep water. It's kind of a 1-2 punch here. I mean, we're talking about, 150 to 200 meters down this very deep, warm water goes. So that's just so much fuel for a hurricane to be able to extract. So if you get that combined with a storm and low wind shear and plenty of moisture of atmosphere, I mean, the sky's the limit on how strong a storm could get out here. So obviously that's, a little concerning. Not to mention, October is the month that we get the most storms in the Caribbean. So you have all these ingredients. You have climatology saying that this could be a problem. And then you throw on this, a favorable MJO phase. I'll remind you how this map works. The green colors indicate rising motion and increasing vorticity. And you notice we didn't have a lot to end September. Again, the time here above each map. We didn't have a lot to end out September, and things remain pretty quiet out here. We've started to get some more greenage to develop over here. And what has happened? Well, we've got that invest, or at least area to watch, moving over the Yucatan. Just happened to run into land, luckily for now, at least. So, it's already feeling the effects of the MJO. It's only going to get more impressive now through the middle of the month, peaking, again, probably right around the 10th through 15th. The MJO going to just be begging the Caribbean to produce a storm, basically. That adds some concern to the forecast. If that wasn't enough, here's the latest ensembles, and it's not a lot, but it's something. This is the European ensembles through 10 days. This gets us right through that favorable MJO phase. Notice some noise down here. We've got some members starting to develop something, and some of them getting mighty strong here, showing major hurricanes in the Caribbean and trying to pull up into the Gulf. Obviously, that's a concerning look. Now, I'm not saying that we need to, start being overly concerned. I'm not saying that we're going to get a storm, but we've got to keep our eye on the Caribbean. Nothing has touched it yet. Nothing has touched the Gulf yet. We've got just extremely warm waters. We've got the MJO phase, climatology, some ensemble data showing something on the European, and the GFS ensemble showing some noise down here. That's more than enough data for me to say, keep a very close eye on it. Now, luckily, not tracking any specific storm right now. We've got that little area out here, which, again, could maybe develop down here towards the Bay of Campeche and then get thrown back down into Mexico. But it's something to watch here for about, we'll say 5 to 10 days out. How about that? That's the time frame that we really need to watch this section of the globe for development. Somewhere we need to watch even sooner, though, that's the southeast coastline. So let's go ahead and dive into some of this kind of nor'easter tropical hybrid system that the models are showing, and that I think it brings some pretty big impacts for some of us by the time we get towards this weekend. All right, let's start with just the number one tool when you're forecasting where a low pressure is going to go, and that's the ensembles. What are all of the different members of the European model saying are going to happen with this potential system? Well, let's start with this. We're going to see some showers and storms starting really tomorrow into the mid-Atlantic, and well, today as well for some of us. But after that, high pressure works in, and this is going to be important for the steering flow. It's also going to bring a really nice shot of fall air into the northeast and mid-Atlantic by the end of the work week. So that's good news. As that's happening, though, notice all of these little low pressures developing. This is Friday night. And we've got strong signal for low pressure developing right off the Florida coast, potentially as early as the Keys, and then pulling up north near the Carolinas, right off the Outer Banks, maybe over the Outer Banks, stalling out a little bit, and then getting thrown kind of back inland and beginning to weaken. That's what the ensembles say, and it's pretty high confidence that that's going to happen. Here's the question mark that needs to be answered. is this right over the Outer Banks and the Chesapeake as what would basically be a strong tropical storm, just without the tropical characteristics, but impacts would be the same? Or is it a little further offshore and maybe not quite as strong and not quite as close to land? That's the big question that we just don't have a perfect answer to. But if I'm in the Outer Banks especially, I'm watching this one like a hawk, because you've already seen this year what coastal storms can do. We haven't had a direct landfall. We've already seen multiple houses out towards Buxton get taken back into the Atlantic. And, obviously, I would not be surprised at all. In fact, I would almost be willing to predict already that that's going to happen again with this storm. Here's why, though, I guess, is the ultimate thing that I need to answer. All right. It all comes down to vorticity. And I know it doesn't look like much. Here's this afternoon. Here's today. Well, actually, today's Tuesday, so that's Wednesday. Here's this afternoon. Here's Tuesday. We've got this little ribbon of vorticity on the tail end of a trough that is up into Canada, actually producing the storm system out there right now. That's going to get pinched off of the flow here. And notice it kind of becomes its own thing. And right here by tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday, we've got a little shortwave lobe of vorticity working over the Ozarks. And you're thinking, Gerald, that's over the Ozarks. Why do I care in the Outer Banks? Well, like I said earlier, what did I tell you to remember? I told you to remember there's a stalled out surface boundary right over here near South Florida. That little piece of energy is going to actually find its way all the way down into that region where we have that stalled out surface boundary. And what happens whenever you get this? You get cyclonic vorticity advection. That's basically an area of spin that's moving somewhere. It's going to move right over this frontal boundary, which already has converging wind and vorticity. You add that to it, it creates rising motion, it stretches that vorticity, and it's a perfect recipe to get low pressure to develop. On top of it developing, it looks to strengthen because this vorticity gets a secondary shot of oomph from it, and this stays in a favorable side of the trough to keep getting stronger all the way into the weekend, and then likely weakening as the upper level pattern becomes more unfavorable, into early next week, and this gets likely brought ashore as something weaker than hopefully it'll be offshore. Again, hopefully it's weakening as it moves inland. Right now, it's what most model data suggests. You can see it here now, and I'll very quickly show you. Again, here's that storm system crossing today. You can see some rain in the northeast overnight tonight, into early tomorrow, into the mid-Atlantic tomorrow afternoon. And then you get that big, nice, dry, high pressure, and you can see then the low pressure beginning to develop right offshore and getting awfully close. So what does that mean for impacts here into the Carolinas, the Chesapeake, the Delmarva, and surrounding areas? Well, let's dive into the model data and try to tell you. Now, this is one run of the European, so expect this to, wiggle back and forth, but this is the general idea right now. Here's Friday afternoon. We've got rain mostly offshore, but clipping the Carolina coastline. Again, I think mainly dry for the mid-Atlantic here on Friday, probably even dry for places like Charlotte, Greenville, Columbia. But if you're in Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, areas like that, maybe we get some rain Friday evening. Here's Saturday afternoon. Notice the low pressure continuing to develop, getting quite strong, now sub 1,000 millibars right off the Outer Banks. Continuing to strengthen, Sunday being the strongest, just lashing the Outer Banks with likely storm surge, coastal flooding, heavy rainfall, but mostly dry everywhere else at that point by Sunday. And then starts to move inland, stays pretty strong, mid-990s. Again, just continuing to lash the Outer Banks with coastal erosion, the beach flooding. I think that's the biggest concern out of this one. Likely gusty winds, and then starts moving inland and weakens as the upper level pattern is no longer supportive, because again, this isn't tropical, this is more mid-latitudinal, meaning it needs help from the upper levels to keep itself, and then we just work inland as probably some weak showers, maybe a couple storms there by early next week, and then it's out of here. That's the European, and that's been the trend, is that general idea. It's been less of a trend to show this up towards Philly and New York City and Boston today. It's been more of a kind of Chesapeake, Delmarva, southbound into the Carolinas, and maybe even Georgia as well out of this. So let's start with rainfall projections. Here's the European operational run. Keeps most of the rain offshore, but the Outer Banks close enough gets pounded with 0.5 foot to 1 foot of rainfall. More than that, we're talking 2 feet of rain off the coast. So too close for comfort. That, again, would cause huge problems into the Outer Banks, a place that is already susceptible just due to geography. So I'd tell you, I'd avoid the Outer Banks this weekend. Again, things could change, but I would start planning now to not go to the Outer Banks this weekend due to the storm system. The GFS, even closer, gets heavy rain even into Wilmington, Jacksonville, North Carolina, kind of surrounding southeastern North Carolina beaches up into the Outer Banks, nearly 0.5 foot of rainfall, 3 inches or so up into Myrtle Beach and up towards Rocky Mount and Virginia Beach, about 3 or 4 inches on the GFS model. What about another model? Let's show you the Canadian model, not nearly as bad, keeps it offshore, kind of the in-between, but still, get some heavy rain near the Outer Banks, not nearly as much, but would still bring beach erosion and things like that on the Canadian. And then we'll show you, what do we have next? We got the Euro AI model, kind of similar to the European and the GFS, kind of a hybrid here. Just slams the Outer Banks with a big coastal storm, big problems, half a foot of rain, coastal flooding, beach erosion. And that even works all the way up towards Virginia Beach, Norfolk, and not as bad into the South Carolina coastline. And again, really not much of anything here into the upstate and the Western Carolinas. All right, what about winds? This is the tricky part of the forecast. I feel confident we're going to get the beach erosion. We're going to get the coastal flooding. You can call it storm surge if you want as well into the Outer Banks. Everywhere else, we'll see what ends up happening. Wind-wise, though, how close does it get? I mean, that's the million-dollar question. The European here gets it close enough that we've got tropical storm force wind gusts. Not sustained winds, but probably sustained as well. But these are the gusts either way that I'm showing you. This would be by overnight Saturday into Sunday. And we're talking 60, 70 mile an hour wind gusts out here again towards Kill Devil Hills and way out into the Outer Banks. That blowing from the ocean over the islands. You're going to get beach erosion. You're going to get coastal flooding. You're going to get the heavy downpours I told you about. You're going to get all of it. And it even gets pretty gusty up in the Delmarva. Virginia Beach gusting up near maybe 40, 50 miles an hour with a storm like this. Even gets pretty gusty all the way up through the Delmarva, the Chesapeake, the Jersey Shore. A breezy day. Now, probably not as high impact there, but a breezy day nonetheless by early next week. And then tries to work inland and even gets some gusty winds into the PD of the Carolinas. Now, that's probably overdoing it a little bit, but I could see max gusts in that 30 to 40 mile an hour range once the storm works inland. Just so much to figure out still, though, because today's Tuesday. This thing probably won't even bring impacts till the weekend and then wouldn't bring further impacts till early next week. So a lot to figure out, but again, this is going to be one we need to pay attention to, especially if you're in the Outer Banks. More than anybody else going to need to watch this one just due to the geography that you're working with. It automatically works against you with these coastal storms. So it's a pretty place to live, but unfortunately not one that the weather really wants humans to inhabit it or inhabit. I don't know. What's the word? Oh gosh, I don't know. You know the word. Inhabit something. It's been a long night, like I said. So I'll leave it there. How about that? And I'll go check a dictionary after this. Inhabitate, is that the word? Whatever. I don't know. I'm done. I quit. I've got a quiz to go take. So I'll have a great one. Stay safe. Again, if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so. Getting close to 50K and all of that fun stuff. All right. Y'all have a great one. Stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.